What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 11 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in if you enjoy. Hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Real quick, before getting into our breakdown, a quick word from our partners at Prize Picks, which is our favorite DFS site of choice this NFL and fantasy football season. If you guys aren't familiar with them, do yourself a favor and check them out. In fact, when you sign up right now and use code ADP, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And look, we're already doing all this research for fantasy football matchups, so why not take advantage of it and get some profits as well? Prize Picks, well, they allow you to basically do exactly that. They have so many different player prop bets, not only in terms of single stat DFS, but also in terms of fantasy score, and you can combine them any which way you want. Super simple, super easy to use. All you have to do, choose two more players from the board, and then just pick the over-under on their projected fantasy score or on their single stat. Again, pretty much for every single matchup as the week progresses, those options will be updated even more so. And then the great thing is you've got two different options in terms of how you want to bet it, whether it's a flex play, so that way you can miss one of your selections but still win. Obviously, that's the safer choice. Or if you want more bang for your buck, check out the power play, where if you get all your picks correct, well, you win even bigger. So again, check all of that out. Details in the description. And we kick off Week 11 on Thursday night with the Patriots at the Falcons. Now, I'll be honest with you, not too many elite fantasy wide receiver options here. Now, yes, even though all of fantasy football rejoiced as Jacoby Myers finally got a touchdown this last week, Myers is still somebody that is probably a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2, like at best, and that's primarily in PPR formats because the Patriots offense, ideally they would like to use Mac Jones as a game manager, not put it all on his shoulders given the fact that he's a rookie, help him out with the rushing attack, and, rely on other weapons like the tight ends that they have there. So all I'm trying to say is that Myers, even though I think he is the most consistent wide receiver option on the Patriots, which is why I continue to have him as my primary preferred wide receiver to start in fantasy, doesn't have the highest ceiling in the world. Now, for the Falcons, I'm looking at Russell Gage and Zacchaeus as far as the wide receivers here because, what's changed since last week? Well, other than the fact that the Falcons got spanked and, they pretty much rested their starters like in the third quarter, so kind of a throwaway game there. Cordero Patterson got hurt, and even though, he has that running back designation, he's also heavily used as a pass catcher, as a wide receiver. And with Calvin Ridley still out, that means that the Falcons are going to even more heavily have to rely on the group that they have. Now, yes, Kyle Pitts probably gets the biggest bump up, but Bill Belichick is a guy that understands how to take away your top weapons. And I would say right now, especially with the state of the Falcons offense, Kyle Pitts is by far, in a way, the guy that if you double team him, take him away, then Matt Ryan has got to look elsewhere. And I think Gage and Zacchaeus are going to be the next two guys up. I think they actually have, similar type of expectations like a Jacoby Myers, but do have higher upside just because I anticipate the Falcons will be more pass heavy. And there's just not a lot of other options out there. Taji Sharp is somebody that, has gotten some opportunities here and there, but I do think Gage and Zacchaeus are above him, kind of on that preferred options for Matt Ryan. So I preferred them here. Again, high-end wide receiver 3, going to be a bit touchdown dependent. I prefer Russell Gage, even though he goosed last week. But again, it was a really atypical week. And I think Gage will get back to having some success here in Week 11. And then, like I mentioned before, Bourne just a little bit too inconsistent. Same with Taji Sharp, too many other guys there to consider, so I am fading them. Moving on, Ravens at the Bears. Here, I'll start Marquise Brown. He is my preferred choice as the wide receiver one for the Baltimore offense. Has been the case pretty much the entirety of this season. The Bears secondary doesn't scare me. And then Rashad Bateman, I'll start him. Even with Sammy Watkins back, Bateman was somebody that got over 10 points in PPR formats this last week. And that's kind of what I'm expecting from him yet again. So somebody that will, again, be in that high-end wide receiver 3, wide receiver through 2 low-end category. If he gets a touchdown, he kind of goes up a little bit more. And then for the Bears, I'm sitting Allen Robinson. It just hasn't been there for him, whether it's been the way he's been utilized, whether it's been the connection with Justin Fields just looking at other options as well. I'm not sure, but I'm not doing this dance with Allen Robinson anymore. Darnell Mooney has been the preferred option. I take a chance on him over Robinson, even though I think both those guys are risky options. And then afterwards, I would sit Sammy Watkins. I think Rashad Bateman has taken that number 2 wide receiver role from Watkins on this Baltimore offense. And with guys like Mark Andrews also there, I think just not enough targets for Sammy Watkins, so I will sit him here. Moving on, Packers at the Vikings. Devontae Adams, easy start. Aaron Rodgers back healthy. I think this will be a high-scoring affair. Adams locked and loaded wide receiver 1. Then for the Vikings, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. They're going to get opportunities. They have to keep pace with the Green Bay Packers. And I think both these guys are probably going to, again, be probably high in wide receiver 2s. Jefferson has a higher ceiling, potentially being a wide receiver 1 as well. And then I'm sitting Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, and MVS. Yes, I know Aaron Jones is hurt, so, maybe some of these guys are going to be utilized more as, pass catchers. Not that they weren't already, but with Aaron Jones, being a really good pass-catching running back, maybe they don't want to put it all on the shoulders of A.J. Dillon, at least not in the pass-catching department. We'll see. But either way, what holds true here with the remainder of the Packer wide receivers is that they are all too inconsistent after Devontae Adams. Now, if you want to take a dart throw at any one of these guys, it would be Allen Lazard. I say that every single week, but he is touchdown dependent in my opinion. So for that reason, I'd prefer to sit all these guys. And again, just solely kind of rely on Devontae Adams, has been the case for honestly several years now with the Packers in fantasy. Afterwards, Colts at the Bills. Here for Indianapolis, nothing new. It's Michael Pittman. It's been Michael Pittman since the start of the season. And I think here versus the Bills, it's going to be a nice opportunity for him in a smash play last week versus the Jaguars. The Colts didn't have to throw it all that much. Again, relied on the rushing attack. Not saying that they won't here again, but, the Bills, a much more high-octane offense. So I think Carson Wentz is going to have to air it out, and Pittman is going to benefit. And as usual, T.Y. Hilton, Zach Pascal, to me, just even though they're like the next guys up, there's just way too big of a gap between them and Pittman, so I'd rather bench them. For the Bills, Stephon Diggs and Emmanuel Sanders. Diggs, last couple of weeks, he's been looking like Diggs of last year. Now, I know Emmanuel Sanders has been pretty disappointing these last few weeks on the other side of the spectrum, but Cole Beasley dealing with a rib injury. Is he 100%? One of the reasons why I have him as a sit, I think Emmanuel Sanders is going to be more involved. Now, this last week, the Bills were absolutely dominating the New York Jets, so, they didn't really have to get all that much from their secondary guys at one point in time. There's a reason why their running backs combined for so many touchdowns. The point being, I think Sanders, in a game that will be more competitive, should get more opportunities. So I think he is due for a bounce-back performance. But again, he's kind of that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 category, as opposed to Diggs, who is a wide receiver 1. Then Lions at the Browns. Again, this is a matchup where if you force me to put everyone as a sit, I really wouldn't have all that many issues with it. Now, with the Lions, man, that offense and Jared Goff passing the football, it's just broken. It is. Khalif Raymond, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't want anything to do with these wide receivers right now. Don't really want anything to do with any of these pass catchers for the Lions. I'm not sure what's leading to Jared Goff, completing only a handful of passes every single game, but it's making all of these weapons kind of unreliable. So I have to sit these guys here. For the Browns, I know, maybe the popular opinion might be go with Jarvis Landry if you go with anyone, but my logic here being is I could see this being a blowout win for the Browns with this Lions defense being pretty lackluster. I think that Baker Mayfield is going to limit the amount of throws that he has. And in those cases, I could see the Browns going for those, big money plays, for those high impact, kind of big touchdown opportunities. And I think DPJ is a guy that fits that bill a little bit more so, more physical, kind of bigger. And I think he has a higher opportunity to, fit that bill and that game script for the Browns if that game plays out that way than Jarvis Landry, who is a guy that, PPR targets, that's what you're relying for there. I just don't think the volume is going to be there in this matchup. I think the Browns are going to rely on the rushing attack and then Baker Mayfield from time to time to throw. I wouldn't be shocked if, he has like 15 completed passes by the end of the game, something low like that. So just from that perspective, DPJ, if there's anyone on the Browns you want to take a chance on, it would be him. And again, if you want to fade this entire wide receiver group in this entire game, I wouldn't fault you too much either. Afterwards, Washington at the Panthers. Terry McLaurin continues to be the only Washington player I want to start. He's boom or bust. Yes, he's kind of in that, probably Tyler Lockett category. He's just so dependent on what the hell happens with Tyler Heineke, whether he has a good game, whether he has a bad game. But I think here that Washington is going to target McLaurin. The Panthers, that defense is a little bit better stopping the run. So I think Washington is going to focus on passing the football. And then for Carolina, yes, I know Robbie Anderson kind of had a pretty nice outing this last week, but there were a lot of inconsistencies at quarterback. At times, P.J. Walker, then Cam Newton, then back to P.J. Walker. Now Cam Newton is supposedly going to start in this game, so he's going to be the quarterback for the Panthers moving forward. And I think that, even though Anderson did have a touchdown for Carolina last week, that was a weird game, playing versus the Cardinals with no Kyler Murray, so the Panthers could kind of do their own thing. Now, I'm not saying that, Washington is an elite team or anything like that, but the point being, Cam Newton has that connection with DJ Moore. I think when push comes to shove, he's going to look to DJ Moore more so than these other wide receivers. And I prefer Moore due to that reason. I don't think this offense is going to have the ability to sustain two fantasy relevant wide receivers because obviously Christian McCaffrey handles so many passes as well. So for that reason, I'm sitting Robbie Anderson. And also, I wouldn't go chasing the points with DeAndre Carter. I think McLaurin is still the top choice here for Washington. Afterwards, Texans at the Titans. For the Texans, it's simple. It's just Brandon Cooks. It's always been just Brandon Cooks. It will continue to be only just Brandon Cooks. I think he is a low to mid-level wide receiver too. For the Titans, A.J. Brown, he's the big name. I think he should have a bounce-back performance here versus the Texans. That defense doesn't scare me at all. Yes, I know Marcus Johnson just had a big week, but I wouldn't be shocked here with the Titans if they rely on the rushing attack, if they rely on the big name. Look, I don't even have Julio Jones listed on this list. IR, obviously, with that hamstring, so he's not going to be playing. So your next options after A.J. Brown, guys like Marcus Johnson, Westbrook. So to me, again, I think the game plan here for the Titans is going to be run the football, handle the game clock, and then when you do pass the football when it's required, mainly A.J. Brown. I think Marcus Johnson just way too inconsistent, too hard to trust. So for that reason, I will fade him here. Then 49ers at the Jaguars. For the 49ers, Deebo Samuel. I think with George Kittle back, he's kind of, either that primary or secondary pass catcher alongside Deebo Samuel. Then Brandon Ayuk, more so of a sit. So I really don't want to start him here. Deebo Samuel proves he can get it done as a pass catcher, as a rusher, even from time to time, depending on the package. So I like Deebo Samuel. Then looking at the Jaguars side of things, Marvin Jones, yes, he can be boom or bust, but I still think he is the wide receiver with the highest upside here. I think he's in that wide receiver 3 range. He's primarily a standard play for me. So if you're in PPR formats, I think there's better options out there than Marvin Jones, especially with how inconsistent these Jaguars wide receivers have been. That's why you see me listing Shenault as a sit. I'm not even looking at the other Jaguar wide receivers. Honestly, the most reliable pass catcher has been Dan Arnold, the tight end. I probably feel more confident playing him than Marvin Jones. But again, in standard formats, I think Jones does have the touchdown upside. But other than that, can't get too excited about any of these Jaguars wide receivers. Afterwards, Dolphins at the Jets. Jalen Waddle continues to be the healthiest wide receiver for Miami, so you play him. Simple as that. I'm not chasing the points from Wilson or Isaiah Ford, even though they had all right outings versus the Ravens. And I could see here Myles Gaskin, Gesicki kind of having big games as pass catchers, especially when it's the Jets. And then for New York, Corey Davis is the wide receiver that I prefer. I think the Jets are kind of back to being a bit of a disaster. Who's going to be the quarterback? Is it going to be White? Is it going to be Joe Flacco? Don't really know. Quarterback drama there. If it's Flacco, I don't trust Elijah Moore all that much. Yes, he had a touchdown last week, but that was at a point in time where the game was already out of hand big time. So you could argue if it was that close, would he get that much playing time? So for that reason, I can only really trust Corey Davis here. I do like Jamison Crowder, but just not getting the amount of volume that I would like to see. I think that transition between him and Moore is happening, and effectively they're kind of negating each other a little bit. So really mainly prefer Corey Davis here as kind of a low to mid-level wide receiver too. Then Saints at the Eagles. Again, for the Saints, if you told me you don't want to start any of their wide receivers, I completely understand. I think Deontay Harris has the highest upside. Yes, he can be in that boomer bust category. I wouldn't play him in PPR formats, more so a standard play. I do want to highlight that for the Eagles. It continues to be only Devonta Smith. You saw it last week. You've seen it the week before. It's Devonta Smith. You can't trust anyone else. Forget about Quez Watkins, Jalen Reagor. Not even going to bother listing them and wasting my time with that. Devonta Smith, I will say, is the much more preferred option out of any wide receiver here on the Eagles or Saints side of things. So keep that in mind. But he does also have boom or bust, kind of abilities. So realize that the upside comes with a bit of a low floor. And then for the Saints, Callaway, Traquan Smith, I just don't think there's enough volume. That's what worries me here in general. I still have questions about Simeon as the quarterback and what that's going to lead to. So again, honestly, I'm going to wrap this up with the way I started it. If you say you don't want to trust any of these New Orleans wide receivers, especially if Alvin Kamara comes back, then I can't fault you at all on that. Then Bengals at the Raiders. For the Bengals, it's the duo of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It's been like that pretty much since the majority of the season, and I'm going to continue to go with that. I think Chase has the higher upside, and I think T. Higgins, kind of in that low-end wide receiver 2 range. For the Raiders, Hunter Renfrow. He has been the most consistent guy all season long. These last couple of weeks, he's been getting the touchdowns as well. I think he's a solid mid-level wide receiver 2 in PPR formats. Then I'm fading Tyler Boyd for the Raiders. Bryan Edwards, Deshaun Jackson. I think Bryan Edwards is still a little bit too big play dependent, and that makes him a little bit too risky, especially when I can start Hunter Renfrow. And then Deshaun Jackson. Maybe some people got excited when he signed there, the big name, et cetera, but I think at this point in time in his career, he's just going to be like 1 or 2 plays per game, and they're going to have to be big plays. So that's just a no for me in terms of a fantasy perspective. Then Cowboys at the Chiefs. I think for the Cowboys, you can actually start all 3 wide receivers. I could see this being a high-scoring affair. I like Lamb, I like Cooper, I like Gallup in that order as far as upside is concerned. I think they can all be in the wide receiver 2 range in PPR formats. I think they have the possibility of all getting to 10 points. For the Chiefs, it's Tyreek Hill. That's been the case all season long. We'll see. The Chiefs kind of looked a little bit better this last week. Will they carry it forward going on? Not sure, but doesn't really matter. Hill is still a wide receiver 1, and then Hardman and Robinson continue to be fades regardless of how this Chiefs offense plays. Afterwards, Cardinals at the Seahawks. So a lot of things to consider here, mainly on the Cardinals side of things. For Arizona, Christian Kirk has been the most consistent guy. That's pretty much been because he's been the healthiest guy. What's going to happen once DeAndre Hopkins returns, once Kyler Murray returns? And those are the two big question marks here. Right now, sounds like Kyler Murray might not play again. We'll see about DeAndre Hopkins. So in that case, Christian Kirk would be the guy that I trust the most. Green and Rondale Moore just haven't had the connection there with Colt McCoy or really any other quarterback not named Kyler Murray. For Seattle, yes, they had a bad game. In fact, they got shut out by Green Bay, but I think they can bounce back here versus the Cardinals. I like Metcalf. I like Lockett this week in that wide receiver 2 category. Then Steelers at the Chargers. I'll start Deontay Johnson. He's a guy that, I kind of backed off this last week without Big Ben. And I think with Big Ben expected to return, I'm back on Deontay Johnson. Simple as that. I think he's a high-end wide receiver too. Chase Claypool, we'll see. He missed this last week. Is he going to be available? That's something that you just got to keep in mind and track. Hasn't gotten as many opportunities as I would like without Juju Smith-Schuster, and I could see the Steelers relying on the rushing attack, especially versus this Chargers defense that struggles in that department. And then for the Chargers, Keenan Allen has kind of returned to that number 1 PPR wide receiver that we were hoping when we drafted him, like in the second, third round in fantasy drafts. So you start him. Mike Williams has been disappointing these last few weeks. Might be surprised to see him as a start, but look, the fact of the matter is I think he's still not 100%, so keep that in mind. But the Steelers defense a little bit banged up, some COVID cases popping up in that secondary, so maybe, Williams will have some opportunities here. He's still getting the targets, so I would start him. I think it's just kind of a fluid situation. At one point in time, Williams was the preferred option in fantasy when he was healthier than Keenan Allen. Now I think it's back to Keenan Allen. So that's the main difference here, but I think they're both still worthy of starts. And then finally, we have got the Giants at the Buccaneers. If Sterling Shepard plays, you play him. He's the most reliable Giants wide receiver. It's as simple as that. In PPR formats, I think he can be in that wide receiver 2 range for the Bucs. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, they play. That's been the case for the majority of the season. You start them. I like their opportunities. And then if Antonio Brown finally comes back, then I think there's a chance of that. I'd be all right playing him. I think they all, in that case, kind of have a lower ceiling, but similar to other guys that we've mentioned, a trio that can all put up 10 fantasy points in PPR formats. And then for the Giants, I'm sitting Tony if Shepard doesn't play. We'll see if Kenny Golladay actually returns. But, I don't love the situation here for the Giants as far as wide receivers are concerned all that much. But with that, we wrap up our Week 11 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe. Give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.